Hey everybody, welcome back to your channel. First of all, I want to thank all of you for your likes and subscriptions. Your support means the world to me and is helping us grow this amazing family. Today, I've got a chilling tale for you, a terrifying story about a drive that went horribly wrong. Buckle up and turn off the lights, because this is one ride you won't forget. Let's get started. First story. So I've come to find that dating online can be crazy. Let me just say that before I say anything else. You see pictures of someone online, talk for a while, and then meet them, not even knowing for sure that they're the person in the picture. It's really absolutely insane. I only wish that I knew that before downloading Tinder myself. I had gone on a few dates with people I met on Tinder, but nothing ever worked out. Most just wanted hookups or weren't ready for commitment. Of course, there are also some creeps, but I didn't come across those types too often. After having Tinder for a few months, I met a girl on the app who seemed way too good to be true. She was absolutely gorgeous, and when she messaged me, I was so excited. I got even more excited the more we talked when I realized that we had so much in common. She was so nice and funny, and from what she told me about herself, she really seemed like my dream girl. After about a week of talking, she asked if I wanted to hang out. I suggested a bar near my place, but she wanted to go to dinner instead. I usually like to get drinks on the first date so I can leave quickly if it goes bad. But I liked this girl so much, and she seemed different, so I agreed to dinner. For purposes of anonymity, we'll just call her Jessica. Now, I was just going to drive to the restaurant myself, but she insisted on picking me up, saying it was the proper thing to do, and so on and so forth. It wasn't the best idea to say yes, but I guess I'm not as smart as I think I am because I agreed and gave her my address. She said she'd pick me up around 8 p.m. the next day, and man, I was really happy. I told all of my friends where we were going, and they told me that I was an idiot for giving a girl I'd never met my address. I thought they were all just being jealous, so I didn't take their comments to heart. I started getting ready around 7, and at exactly 8, my doorbell rang. I opened the door and immediately was disappointed by what I saw. She looked nothing like her pictures. Well, not nothing like them. It was obviously the same person, but at least 10 or 15 years older. I didn't say anything, and figured that I'd go on the date and see how it went, because I did still like her personality over text, at least. She opened the door for me and walked around to the other side and got in. We started driving in the direction of the restaurant, which was about 30 minutes away. She told me how handsome she thought I was, and that I was even better looking than my pictures. Then, very awkwardly, she said, "What about me? Am I even more beautiful than my pictures?" At first, I thought she was joking. She had to be, right? There was no way that she didn't know that she was much more unattractive than when she took those pictures. I really didn't know what to say, but my dad always told me to be honest. So I decided a half-truth was better than nothing. I said she looked good, but then I was curious how long ago she had taken those pictures. It was immediately obvious she took offense to the question, so I quickly apologized and told her to forget I ever asked. I was hoping we could move on from that, but she clearly took it very personally and proceeded to give me the silent treatment for the next 5 minutes, like some big baby. I had really begun to regret the decision to go out with her, and definitely regretted giving her my address. I knew the way to the restaurant, so I was keeping track of where we were going as she drove. I noticed that she missed the turn on the street where it was located, and I told her to just do a U-turn at the next intersection, but she didn't respond. She passed the next intersection, and I started to get a little freaked out. I told her again that she needed to turn around, and again, I got no response. She drove along the road, and I asked her over and over what she was doing and where we were going, but she refused to even look at me. We stopped at a red light, and I knew that I just had to get out of that car. I went to open the door, but I saw that it was locked. There was no button to unlock it, and it was one of those locks that retracted inside the door, so I couldn't even manually do it myself. I was trapped. I took my phone out, and as discreetly as possible, I texted my friend my location. After driving for some time, Jessica pulled into an empty parking lot outside a closed amusement park. She parked in a spot on the far end of the lot. I didn't know exactly what she planned to do, but I had an idea that I was not at all about to let that happen. She took off her seatbelt, and I reached into my bag. She grabbed my arms and tried pinning me down. I fought back against her and tried as hard as I could to keep her off of me. Finally, she let go of my arm, and I pulled out my pepper spray and sprayed her directly in the face. The only problem with using pepper spray in such a confined space is that you end up getting it on yourself as well. My eyes immediately began to burn and water as she screamed in the seat beside me. She started calling me every name in the book as she tried wiping her face with her shirt, and during the struggle, I was able to reach over to her and unlock the doors. I shoved it open and fell out onto the ground, scraping my knees in the process. By that point, I was having trouble seeing clearly, and my chest had begun to burn from breathing in the fumes from the pepper spray. I tried standing, but was so dizzy, I kept falling back to the ground. I stumbled as I slowly made my way across the lot. I heard her door open and her yelling at me to come back over. I looked back, and through all the blurriness and tears, I saw her tripping over herself as she followed me. I screamed for help, but no one was around to hear my cries. Jessica started to say that she was just joking and that she didn't mean to freak me out. She said if I just came back to the car with her, we'd go to the restaurant as planned, and that she was sorry. She said this in between screams of pain from her eyes burning. It was terrifying, and I genuinely wondered if she thought that I was actually going to believe her and go back to the car with her. Was she really that stupid? She was close behind me in no time, and just as I reached the gates of the amusement park, she grabbed me by the shoulders and yanked me back. But the gates had already opened, and I screamed for my life. I saw a security guard come running out and tell Jessica to get off of me, which she did immediately. The guard helped me up and tried to keep Jessica there, but there was no stopping her from getting back in her car and driving away. The police were called at that moment, and they told me that they'd open an investigation, but nothing ever came of it. Believe it or not, this girl was never found. I moved out of the apartment I was living in at the time and just moved back in with my parents. I started to get really paranoid for a while that she would find me, but it still hasn't happened. I use my story now as a cautionary tale for others going down the same path that I once was. You never know who wants to hurt you, but it can and does happen. So please be careful. Second story. My boyfriend and I are the adventurous type. We love to go out of the house as much as possible, doing literally whatever outdoor activity we can. This time, we decided late in the day that we wanted to go camping for around a week. Neither of us has the typical job where your hours are set. We basically work for ourselves when it comes to our scheduling, though we work for a larger company in the grand scheme of things. We packed our bags and headed towards the campsite. It's a remote area in the Appalachian Mountains where you can camp for free without permits or approval needed. We were driving along a narrow mountain road as dusk fell, and I made the horrible mistake of not turning on my high beams. I don't know why. It was something I hadn't thought of doing, and would prove to be something I'd regret for the rest of my life. It didn't help that I was also going way too fast for the terrain and time of night. Within a split second, my boyfriend screamed, and only feet in front of the car, we both saw a large downed tree in the middle of the road. There was little I could do other than slam on the brakes and hope that we could stop before hitting the tree. Of course, we weren't that lucky. We crashed into the tree, and I was out for a couple of seconds. I remember waking up really groggy, with intense ringing in my ears. But my main priority was making sure my boyfriend was okay. For purposes of streamlining the story, I'll just call him Jack. I looked over at Jack, and he was completely out. It was dark, but the moon was lighting up his face enough for me to see that his eyes were closed. I yelled his name to try to wake him up, but he wasn't responding at all. I took my phone out of my pocket, turned on the flashlight, and pointed it at him. I didn't really know what to expect, but what I saw was something I definitely would not have predicted. I saw the blood first. He was wearing a white shirt, so it was pretty apparent. And then, of course, I noticed the tree branch puncturing through his chest. It wasn't a huge branch. It was probably the same circumference as a finger. It had come through the windshield and was still attached to the tree. I didn't want to shake him because I didn't want to cause any more trauma to his body in the process of trying to wake him up. So I just didn't touch him at all. I tried calling 911, but there was no service. I started trying to think of what I could do to help him, but there were so few options. The car wouldn't even start. So even if driving away was the right idea, it wasn't an option. I had a knife in my pocket, so the next logical solution in my mind was to cut the branch from the tree and try to get him out of the car and lay him down on the side of the road so I could get help, knowing someone wouldn't crash into our car and make things worse. I hopped onto the hood of the car and tried so hard to cut that branch, but the knife was small, and I was getting nowhere with it. I started to panic. It had already been over 30 minutes, and he still hadn't woken up. I got back into the car and just started to pray. That was weird for me, since I hadn't prayed since I was a kid. But at this point, I was willing to try anything. It felt like I was praying for hours, but only another 30 minutes had passed. I was only holding on to this glimmer of hope because he wasn't actively bleeding during that hour. The branch wasn't in the center of his chest, so I was hoping that it missed his heart. I felt his pulse, and it wasn't strong, but it was still there. All I could do was wait for someone to hopefully come along and help us. I don't know if it was luck or divine intervention, but I started to see light coming from behind us. It filled the inside of the car, and I got out as fast as possible, screaming and waving at the driver. He stopped right behind our car, rolled down his window, and asked what was wrong. I started explaining to him fast, and he told me to slow down since he couldn't understand me. I explained slower, and the expression on his face changed instantly when he realized what I was saying. He got out of his truck and went over to the passenger side door with his flashlight, shining it on Jack. I heard him curse under his breath and tell me that the only hope Jack had would be to cut the branch and try to drive him down the mountain to the nearest town, since he also had no service. He had a chainsaw in the back of his truck, and I was terrified the shaking of the branch would hurt Jack even more, but there really was no other choice. He started sawing about a foot in front of Jack's chest. I covered Jack with a blanket to try to minimize any sawdust from getting in the wound. It did vibrate his body a little bit, but he wasn't conscious, so at least he wasn't in pain. Or so I thought. Finally, he was free from the tree. The man helped me pick him up as gently as possible, and we placed him in the back seat of his truck, laying down. I got into the passenger side, and the man turned around and began driving down the mountain. As we drove, Jack started to regain consciousness, but was in immense pain. I tried to comfort him, telling him everything would be okay. Suddenly, the man driving the truck said he knew a quicker way to get help. Instead of heading towards the town, he turned onto a narrow, overgrown path. Panic started to set in again as the surroundings grew darker and more unfamiliar. I questioned him, but he insisted he knew what he was doing. After what felt like an eternity, we arrived at an old, abandoned cabin deep in the woods. The man insisted we go inside, saying there was a phone we could use to call for help. I didn't trust him, but Jack needed immediate attention. We carried Jack inside and laid him on an old, dusty couch. The cabin was filled with strange, archaic medical equipment and old photographs of people who looked eerily familiar. As the man rummaged through drawers, I noticed something was off. The photographs seemed to change when I wasn't looking directly at them, and the faces began to resemble Jack and me. A cold chill ran down my spine. I demanded to know what was going on, but the man just smiled and said, "You were meant to come here." Suddenly, Jack began to convulse, and the lights flickered. The man whispered something in a language I didn't understand, and the room grew icy cold. Shadows seemed to move on their own, and I felt an overwhelming sense of dread. I realized we were in a place where time and reality didn't hold the same meaning. In a desperate attempt to save Jack, I grabbed an old medical kit and tried to stabilize him. The man just watched with a sinister grin. Jack's eyes opened wide, and he started to speak in a voice that wasn't his own, recounting the history of the cabin and the horrors that had occurred there. It was a place of dark rituals and lost souls, trapped between worlds. Just as I thought we were lost, a blinding light filled the room, and everything went silent. When I opened my eyes, we were back in the truck, on the main road, with the town lights visible in the distance. Jack was unconscious again, but breathing steadily. The mysterious man in the cabin were nowhere to be seen. I drove to the town and got Jack to the hospital. He had a punctured lung, but survived after several surgeries. To this day, Neither of us can explain what happened that night. We often have nightmares and feel a strange connection to the place, as if it's still watching us. I've stayed by Jack's side through his recovery, and we've grown closer than ever. We don't go on adventurous trips anymore. Instead, we try to find peace in the ordinary, always looking over our shoulders, haunted by the memory of that night in the mountains. And as the echoes of our harrowing journey fade into the night, remember to keep your eyes wide open on those lonely drives home. If this tale sent shivers down your spine, don't forget to share it with your fellow thrill seekers and subscribe for more tales of the macabre. Like the shadows that dance on the edge of your vision, let's grow this community together. Until we meet again, may the road ahead be free of shadows. Or perhaps that's where the true horror lies. Drive safe, my friends. But never forget, sometimes the scariest stories are the ones we tell ourselves when the headlights flicker in the dark.